Only one cold tablet can say it relieved my stuffy nose in space. Only Actifed.
Only one cold tablet can say it relieved my sneezing in space. Only Actifed.
Only Actifed has been on every manned U.S. space flight since Apollo 7. It comes to you full strength without a prescription. Only Actifed is the cold tablet most recommended by doctors.
Only one cold tablet can say all that.
Only Actifed.
Syracuse takes on Boston College Saturday at noon.
9 salutes St. Daniel's. Central New York, a great place to grow.
Next week on Good Morning America, beam aboard the Starship Enterprise with William Shatner, Admiral Kirk, and the crew of Star Trek IV. Next week on Good Morning America.
America's favorite game show is also very funny.
Just a little silly, that's all.
Wheel of Fortune, it'll bring out the kid in you.
Monday through Saturday at 7 on WIXT 9.
He set St. Elmo's fire, and now he's blaming it on the radio. John Parr on Nightlife Tonight.
Friday night at 11:30.
Cosmetic surgery. It's helped many people look better, but there is an ugly side. Unqualified practitioners lured by big money.
Watch ABC's World News Tonight with Peter Jennings.
Weekday mornings at 9, live from New York, it's Donahue with conversation that counts. The issues you care about, the people you love to meet. Join us on WIXT 9.
Another area bank is robbed. The story at 5:30.
There isn't a crowd out there. There's just one other human being, and we're trying to figure out life together.
Weekday mornings at 10.
This is Jack Klugman. Here are some scenes from the next episode of Quincy.
I want you to do an autopsy.
On whom?
On me.
My answer to you right now is no, I'm not going to give it to you.
Doctor, you know I have nothing more to lose. You and your friend do.
Monday at 4 on WIXT 9.
Many of Central New York's historic buildings have been lost to the wrecking ball. The Landmarks Association of Central New York wants to stop that. The Landmarks Association is a private nonprofit organization dedicated to the preservation of Central New York's historic buildings. But the Landmarks Association can't do it alone. They need you. If you'd like more information about the Landmarks Association, then call 475-0119. Together, we can save the past.
WIXT 9 in Syracuse.
A state trooper is laid to rest. Details at 5:30.
Jeopardy! It's where you can win it all or lose it all.
Watch Jeopardy! There's everything to risk.
Monday through Saturday at 7:30 on WIXT 9.
9 salutes DeSales High. Central New York, a great place to grow.
If you cannot afford to hire a lawyer, you may be eligible to receive free help from our agency if you live in any one of these 5 counties. Simply call the number at the location nearest you.
WIXT 9, your SU basketball station.
Tuesday.
Name is Spencer.
He's got his principles.
What are you asking me to do, Spencer? Choose between good and evil. Is it really that tough?
And he's got his friends.
You're the one with a flair for the dramatic.
Robert Urich is Spencer for hire.
WIXT 9 in Syracuse.
From ABC News, the Weekend Report. Here's Tom Jarriel.
Good evening. In the Philippines tonight, the verdict was finally handed down in the trial for the murder of popular opposition leader Benigno Aquino, more than 2 years after his assassination. Following a controversial trial, a three-judge panel rejected accusations that the Philippine military was responsible for the murder, acquitting Armed Forces Chief General Fabian Ver and 25 others. Mark Litke has more from Manila.
General Fabian Ver and his co-defendants stood stoically through 2 hours of summation in a sweltering courtroom, but they were all rewarded with their patience, even if they showed almost no emotion. The court ruled that none of the 26 were guilty in the plot to assassinate opposition leader Benigno Aquino. The three-judge panel upheld the military's original version of the assassination, that Aquino was slain by a communist gunman, Rolando Galman, as Aquino returned from exile in the United States 2 years ago, and that Galman was gunned down by soldiers escorting Aquino, all in the line of duty. During the 7-month trial, an eyewitness had testified that she saw a soldier shoot Aquino in the back of the head, but the defense had their own eyewitnesses to say it was Galman who did it. The court ruled that the evidence against the defendants was contradictory at best, but mostly tended to negate the charges against them. Outside the courtroom, demonstrators showed their displeasure with the verdict, and they are especially angry at President Marcos's promise to reinstate General Ver as Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces. But knowing that he'll face a storm of adverse publicity, Marcos has hinted that Ver may return just in an advisory role.
Many Filipinos, long grown cynical to a legal process here dominated by Mr. Marcos, expected Ver and the others to be acquitted. But the verdict is still bound to create more outrage and indignation, adding even more emotional fuel to the ongoing political crisis here in the Philippines. Mark Litke, ABC News, Manila.
The death toll from last week's bloody hijacking in Malta rose to 60 today. An Israeli woman, Nitzan Mendelsohn, who was shot in the head by the hijackers of that Egypt Air jetliner, died today in a Malta hospital. Close allies worked out major differences today in the Jonathan Pollard spy case. He's the American accused of selling U.S. secrets to Israel. Pollard's arrest was followed by angry State Department complaints of Israeli stonewalling, including allowing 2 of their diplomats to slip away from American questioning. Today, an Israeli apology and a pledge of close cooperation. Bob Zelding has the first of 2 reports.
The government of Shimon Peres moved Sunday to halt the skid in relations with the United States brought about by the Jonathan Pollard spying affair. Speaking through Cabinet Secretary Yossi Beilin, Peres implied his own investigation has confirmed that Israeli conduct violated a relationship of friendship and trust.
Such activity, to the extent that it did take place, was wrong, and the government of Israel apologizes.
The statement pledged to bring those involved to account, to permanently dismantle the intelligence unit involved, and to do what's necessary to see the incident does not recur. Israeli sources confirmed that a defense ministry unit headed by this man, Rafi Eitan, dealt with Pollard, but in an appearance on This Week with David Brinkley, former ambassador to Washington Simcha Dinitz said top officials were unaware of the Pollard connection.
It caused us tremendous embarrassment to ourselves, to our own system, that something like this can happen without the political level knowing about it.
Sources here say material delivered by Pollard will be returned to the United States and that the Peres government will permit U.S. investigators to interview 2 Israeli diplomats brought home from Washington right after the Pollard arrest. Israel is a country which looks at the world through the lens of its security requirements. Sunday's overture to Washington suggests that to Israeli eyes, the goodwill of the United States remains security requirement number 1. Bob Zelnick, ABC News, Jerusalem.
This is Dennis Trout at the State Department, where officials issued a warm response to the Israeli apology on behalf of Secretary of State George Shultz. The Secretary said, "We are satisfied with it and wholeheartedly welcome it." Shultz and Israeli Prime Minister Shimon Peres reportedly worked out their differences in a telephone call Saturday night. In addition to returning U.S. documents and arranging interviews with Israeli diplomats, Jerusalem will produce Rafi Eitan for questioning. Former CIA Director Richard Helms, appearing on ABC's This Week with David Brinkley, said the whole affair has been blown out of proportion.
Countries do it. They try not to get caught. If they do get caught, then that's bad. But if they don't get caught, it's a fine thing.
On the same broadcast, Senator Patrick Moynihan said Washington's real concern is spying not by Jerusalem, but by Moscow. He called for a new determination to confront it.
I think we should be alarmed, and I think we should start pulling out fingernails to make clear it's not funny, it's not worth it, and it won't be tolerated.
FBI Director William Webster said authorities are responding to that threat and revealed that new investigations are underway stemming from interrogations of KGB defector Vitaly Yurchenko.
We have opened a substantial number of cases based on very useful information that he has supplied.
Concentrating on Soviet affairs is what most counterintelligence specialists think Washington should do. For that reason alone, they hope to close the book soon on the distractions of the Pollard case. Dennis Trout, ABC News, the State Department.
White House National Security Advisor Robert McFarlane reportedly is considering resigning shortly after the first of the year. Newsweek quotes friends of McFarlane as the source of that information. McFarlane is said to feel that his influence with the president has declined since the arrival of Chief of Staff Donald Regan. Vietnam and the United States today completed their first joint effort to locate the remains of American soldiers missing in action, but the results were disappointing following the excavation of a B-52 crash site. Nevertheless, the prospect of further joint projects like this is offering the families of MIAs their first glimmer of hope in years. Jim Laurie reports.
The Americans, their tractor and object of attention, moved into Yen Tung village 13 days ago. In the first joint U.S.-Vietnam search for MIA remains, they displaced one village family and tore down 3 buildings. The U.S. will pay compensation. Working steadily, the U.S. team uncovered the site of a B-52 crash 13 years ago. But in the end, the results were less than hoped for. Battered parts of the aircraft were found, but bone fragments uncovered seemed inadequate to identify 4 missing Americans.
The analysis of those remains, of course, will have to be done when we return them to the Central Identification Laboratory. But at this point, I don't think the outlook is positive for any identifications.
The search pointed up the difficulties of trying to account for the more than 1,700 MIAs believed in Vietnam and 600 more in Laos and Cambodia. While the U.S. would like to search more sites, it's acknowledged the results could be disappointing. More than 400 men went down in air crashes over water, many more in very remote areas. The only hopeful sign is that Vietnam seems more willing to help now than a few years ago.
Just how full an accounting it's realistic to expect, neither U.S. or Vietnamese officials will say. But privately, both concede that of the more than 1,700 Americans lost in Vietnam, most will probably never be found. Jim Laurie, ABC News, Yen Tung Village, Vietnam.
In South Africa, some 10,000 blacks rallied today to celebrate the formation yesterday of that country's largest union federation. Today, the Congress of South African Trade Unions, representing 500,000 workers, demanded the abolition of apartheid within 6 months.
The EPA started 15 years ago. How well has it cleaned up America? We'll see tomorrow on Good Morning America.
The frigid wrath of winter struck the Midwest and the northern plains today with a deadly snowstorm and sub-zero temperatures. There were blizzard conditions in Minnesota and Iowa, where only the hardy ventured out. Only the Green Bay Packers seem to be at home in the weather, defeating Tampa Bay in a snowstorm. With traveling dangerous, at least 42 deaths have been blamed thus far on the winter's blast. The weather was no problem in outer space today. In fact, it was a nice time to work outside. So shuttle astronauts Jerry Ross and Sherwood Spring recharged their spacesuits and did just that. Mike Von Frem reports.
Most of the day was spent experimenting with Atlantis' 50-foot mechanical arm, which the astronauts used much like a cherry picker.
Thanks for the ride, Mary. Can I have another ride later?
NASA wants to see what it's like to do construction work in the weightless environment. What they learned from these experiments will be put to use when a space station is expected to be constructed in 1993. The astronauts snapped together a 45-foot aluminum tower complete with an American flag. They did hit one snag, a pin in the base of another structure stuck, setting the schedule back. The astronauts have found this pretty tough work.
I think I'm getting iron worker pay for this, aren't I, Dave?
Much of the problem has been the fact that they're working in these bulky spacesuits, but the $2 million suits protect them from the deadly lack of pressure as they travel at 17,500 miles per hour in temperatures that dip as low as minus 250 degrees Fahrenheit.
NASA officials feel this experimental space construction work has been a big success
bringing them closer to the day when a space station will become a reality. But in the back of their minds is the worry of the budget. This year, Congress trimmed $25 million from the project, and there is concern that NASA could be a big loser in future battles for money. Mike Von Fremd, ABC News, Johnson Space Center, Houston.
And that's our report for tonight. Steve Bell and Kathleen Sullivan will have tomorrow's first news on World News This Morning, followed by Good Morning America. I'm Tom Jarriel for ABC News. Good night.
From Washington, this has been The Weekend Report. The Weekend Report is a presentation of ABC News.
This is WIXT Television, Syracuse, New York, serving the Central New York area on Channel 9. Our studios are located on Bridge Street in East Syracuse, with our transmitting facility atop Mount Sevier in Pompey, New York. Channel 9 is authorized to operate with an effective radiated power of 79.6 kilowatts. WIXT is a subscriber in good standing to the National Association of Broadcasters and an equal opportunity employer. From the management and staff of WIXT 9, a very pleasant good night.